Alright guys, I'm currently doing this video. I don't have any internet connection, which means I won't be able to upload this video right when it's done as I usually do. So right now I'm doing the video on January 31st, Friday, January 31st, but that does not mean the video will be uploaded today. So the video is uploaded very later, late as late as can be, next week. The video is uploaded next week. I apologize about that. I just haven't been able, don't have any internet connection. I won't be able to upload this video. So right now, for the time being, so that way when I do have internet, I can just, upload the video immediately. I'm just going to record this video for you guys, which is my top 4 worst films of 2013. Now, before I get into this list, I just want to mention, if there were certain movies out there that you thought were really, really bad this year, and it's not on this list, odds are it's because I haven't seen the movie, or maybe because I did see the movie and I didn't think it was as bad as maybe you thought, but really the odds are, if the movie is not on this list, odds are I haven't seen it. So that's why these 4 movies are, some of the worst movies I've seen this year. They're not necessarily the worst movies I've ever seen in my life, although number 1 definitely is the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. Yes, I actually managed to see a movie worse than Jack and Jill in about less than a year. That sucks. But the only movie that has an exception of being one of the worst movies I've ever seen, is number 1. The other ones are just, bad, but I wouldn't consider the worst movies of all time. Some of the worst movies of all time, so I just want to mention that before we go ahead with this video. So, without further ado, I bring you guys the long-awaited list of the top 4 worst films of 2013, so let's get started. At number 4, we have G.I. Joe Retaliation. This movie was pushed back almost an entire year for post-conversion 3D. Yeah, remember when that happened? That was one of the, one of the first on-screen videos, well, one of the many on-screen videos that I did. One of the first I had this kind of background with it. And that was one of the reasons why G.I. Joe was postponed until 2013 because of post-conversion 3D. That right there sets me off about this movie, because this movie was pushed back an entire year. Not to work on the script, not to work on the story, not to work on the effects, or anything that, makes a movie good, on the story, on the script, or anything like that. The movie pushed back an entire year, not to work on the story or anything, but because they wanted to work on the shitty post-conversion 3D that added a couple dollars to your movie ticket. Hollywood at its finest, people. Hollywood at its finest. I'm not saying that in a sarcastic way. No, that's literally just all Hollywood does these days. But yeah, a movie that ended up being this bad was pushed back an entire year, and nothing was fixed on it other than adding 3D to it. That's the reason right there why this should be on my list of worst movies of 2013. I mean, almost an entire year, from June to March, June 2012 to March 2013, this movie was pushed back till, and they didn't work on anything that was actually important. I know that the 3D wasn't the only reason that it was pushed back. They wanted to add some more scenes regarding Channing Tatum's character Duke, because he does die off very early in the movie. But still, if you wanted to work on small story elements like that, why not on the actual script and the overall story itself? Because the movie ended up being this bad, and yet nothing was worked on in that almost 1 year time span of the movie being pushed back. That's another thing about this movie that I just really, really hated. Channing Tatum's character, Duke, dies very early on in the movie. My main problem with this, some people may say that, well, that's a really good thing, because I hate Channing Tatum, and the fact that he's not in these movies anymore makes him just a little bit better. Well, yeah, that's one thing, but why the fuck was he killed off? It has no impact on the movie whatsoever. It just seems incredibly abrupt and just out of context. I mean, if they had saved Duke's death for an inevitable 3rd G.I. Joe movie, or hell, maybe even for the ending of this movie, it would have made a little bit more sense. But they kill him off right in the beginning of the movie. And going back to them adding scenes for Duke's character in this movie, what scenes? They added maybe 2 other scenes in the entire movie, and that was it. That's why the whole movie was pushed back an entire year, just to film 2 extra scenes. That was it. Oh, okay, the 3D too, but that really, adding that into that, 2 scenes that needed to be added into the movie, and they wanted to add 3D into the movie, that took almost an entire year. So when you finished all that up in, like, say, 6 months, what did you just do? Sit on your asses and just left the film on a shelf until you brought it out to be shown to theaters? Again, why wasn't anything else worked on in this entire movie? And you know what, maybe it was. Maybe the movie was actually really good and they decided, you know what, in the extra time that we have, we should probably work on this, and it ended up sucking ass because they actually did work on a little bit of it. You know, maybe that's the case, I don't know. But the movie just sucked, plain and simple. Another thing that I really hated about this movie was the characters, which, aka, none of the characters. There was not a single really good character in this movie at all, and all the characters were just completely interchangeable. If you had taken one character out and plugged in a new character, you would have no change or difference at all, whatsoever. And that's really sad because these are some of my favorite G.I. Joe characters from the comic books, from the cartoon, from, you know, past movies, if there were any. In the G.I. Joe, in a new G.I. Joe movie, a live-action G.I. Joe movie. You got Flint, you got Lady J, you have Roadblock, all these great characters that I loved from the cartoon and the comics. And they do nothing with them whatsoever. And I don't mean just, you know, they disrespect them, they don't use them in the correct way. No, they just do nothing with them. They're just there just to be there. There's no development for these characters whatsoever. There's no, there's nothing interesting with these characters at all. They don't have any badass, you know, really cool moments. They just do nothing with them. They just are brought along with the film, and that's it. There's nothing done with these characters whatsoever. I mean, it would have been fine. It would have been bad. I mean, you know, it would have been bad if they were, you know, disregarded and they just did a complete 180 from the characters from the comic books and the cartoon. You know, that would have been bad, but at least I can give them a little bit of credit because they did something with them. They didn't do that here. They did nothing with these characters. You don't know who Flint is. You don't know who Roadblock is. You don't know who Lady J is. Well, Lady J, I think, is the only character that they actually did complete this justice to, because in the comic books and in the cartoon, Lady J was a tomboy, and Lady J didn't do anything that any other girl did. But in this movie, she is prancing around in skimpy clothing just to complete a certain mission. Great job there, Hasbro and Hollywood. Great job. But at least with that, they did something with the character. Again, I'll give it some credit towards. I mean, it's not something that they did good with, but, you know, at least they did anything with them, because all the other characters in the movie have no development whatsoever, which makes me wonder, why did they bring in these characters when we could have had the other characters from the first movie brought in here? And that's another thing. There are so many things left out from the past movie that aren't brought into this movie. They're completely left out for no particular reason whatsoever. Like, again, all of the cast members, all of the G.I. Joes, you know, previous G.I. Joes from the previous movie aren't here. And instead of getting developed characters that we all knew and grew to love in the previous G.I. Joe movie, we get boring, stock, completely interchangeable nothings in this movie. You know, we don't get to know who Flint is, or Roadblock, or anybody else. It's just nothing. Just plain and simply nothing. Why none of the characters were brought in from the other movies, I have no idea why. Destro, where the fuck was he in this entire movie? I know they give an explanation as to why he's not in, why he's not in the movie, because Cobra Commander doesn't decide to break him out, but that's my fucking point. Why the fuck does Cobra Commander not break him out? I mean, didn't Cobra Commander risk his ass at the end of the last G.I. Joe movie, G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra, to, save McCullen, to save Destro at the end of the movie? So why didn't he break him out here? Wouldn't he have done that if that actually made sense, if the script was written properly? It makes no goddamn sense whatsoever. I mean, this isn't like a minor character that you can just leave out of the film and that's it, won't have any effect on the film. This is fucking Destro. Next to Cobra Commander, he's the fucking main villain. He's the main bad guy, next to Cobra Commander. So why the fuck is he not in this movie? And to add insult to injury, they blow up the area where he was being kept in the prison. So he's fucking dead. Not only is he not going to be in this movie, but he's not going to be in future G.I. Joe movies ever again. What the fuck? Again, like I said, he's the main villain next to Cobra Commander. Why the fuck would you not bring him in? He's Cobra's weapon supplier. He's the guy that makes all the weapons for Cobra. Why the fuck wouldn't you bring him into the movie? Is it because the actor who played him in Rise of Cobra, Christopher Eccleston, I believe, didn't want to come back and reprise his role? Okay, yeah, fine, but there's a little thing called recasting, and this is one of the only exceptions where I think that would actually work, because He's a he's a walking CGI effect. His face, his head is a silver CGI effect. It doesn't really matter which actor you got. It doesn't really matter if you recasted it. It's a fucking CGI effect. You really wouldn't know the difference. I mean, you know, it doesn't matter if the actor didn't want to come back. Who cares? Just CGI the face and make him look kind of like the actor. It doesn't really matter. You know, why he was not brought back is just fucking beyond me. Again, and they even kill his character off, which is just insulting. So now we not only don't get him in this movie, we don't get him in future G.I. Joe movies. So fuck you, Hasbro, and fuck you, John M. Chu, who made this movie. Did you really expect the guy who made the Justin Bieber movie to make this good? Really? Like, I didn't love Rise of Cobra, but I hated this one, and this one makes that one look absolutely amazing. And again, Destro, he was barely in the last movie. He was in the movie for maybe a minute and a half, at best, for one scene, and he was in one scene for a minute and a half in the last movie, at best, and then he's locked up at the end of that movie. That's a complaint about that movie, but they don't bring him back at all in this movie. They have the opportunity to do it, but they don't take that fucking opportunity. Like, what the fuck? Like, that's one thing I can say that's good about this movie, is that they do use Cobra Commander appropriately, and he actually looks like Cobra Commander instead of, like, Freddy Krueger with a plastic bag over his face, like in Rise of Cobra. But why Destro was not brought into the movie is beyond me, especially when he was completely underused in the last movie. You know, that was one thing that pissed me off in this movie. There's just so many things left out from the other movie. There was a lot of recasts. There was a lot of characters that were brought back into the, there was a lot of new characters that I brought into this movie to fill in for other characters, which just makes you wonder, why was this a fucking reboot? I mean, it would be justified because not a whole lot of people loved Rise of Cobra, so it's kind of justifiable as to why you would make this a reboot. So why didn't you just take that opportunity, Hasbro, and make this movie a reboot? It just make a little bit more sense. Again, especially because you have so many characters that are taken out from the last movie, so many new characters inserted here, and a lot of recasts, that you can make it would be appropriate for this to be a reboot. Why don't you go the Incredible Hulk route and make it as kind of a reboot, kind of a sequel thing? I mean, that would make a little bit more sense. That was what I was expecting with this movie. But no, it's a straight-on sequel, yet with none of the characters from the last G.I. Joe movie. I know there's a lot of G.I. Joes, a lot of other G.I. Joes besides the one that were in Rise of Cobra, but you can, still bring back or give at least a simple explanation as to why those characters aren't in this movie. That's just something that really pissed me off in this movie. Some other stuff that I really just plain simply did not like was, the action scenes. The action scenes were just boring. They all seemed like the exact same action scene, the people firing at each other, and that was really about it. There was one great action scene, which was, the scene that we all saw in the trailers, which was, Snake Eyes and Jinx versus all the red ninjas on the side of the mountain. That was a really cool action scene, but majority of the other action scenes were just people firing at each other, which was really annoying. But it's kind of expected when watching, a G.I. Joe movie. I mean, it's about dudes, guys in the army shooting each other. It's kind of expected, but they can be a little bit more creative with the action scenes. But that about does it for this movie. This movie was an extreme disappointment for me. Why they had almost an entire extra year added onto this movie for development and for making it the best movie that they possibly could, they didn't take that opportunity at all is beyond me. All they did was add 3D to it, which in my opinion made the movie worse because it made it very, very dark and just very hard to understand and see what was going on. I did like some stuff in the movie, don't get me wrong, like I loved the look of Cobra Commander, but all he did was stand around and shout orders, but then again, that's kind of all he did in the cartoon anyways. Ray Stevenson as Firefly was awesome, and it was nice to see Firefly in a G.I. Joe movie finally. Again, Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, any scene with those two fighting or working together was just really, really awesome. Although that was a very just, why were they working together? I mean, they're mortal enemies. It just doesn't really make too much sense to have them working together. I know they have worked together before in the comic books as well as cartoon, but I didn't really much prefer them to do that in the cartoon or there. Neither do I like it here. I just thought it was really out of character given these two characters' history, but that about does it for this movie. I absolutely hated this movie. It was a big, extreme disappointment to me. Almost an entire year of extra development, and that all went to nothing but stupid 3D. Just pissed me off on, to absolute ridiculous degree. So that's all I have to say about G.I. Joe Retaliation. Just fuck it all to hell. And if you want to see a good, a decent G.I. Joe movie, watch G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra. But if you want to see a good G.I. Joe movie, a badass G.I. Joe movie, watch the cartoon movie from the 80s, or hell, watch the actual cartoon from the 80s. That's really sad when you can get more entertainment out of a Saturday morning cartoon than you can an actual movie made by people who are paid to make the best possible movies they can. That's all I have to say about that. Now, the number 3 spot, we have, coincidentally, The Hangover Part 3. Now, before I talk about The Hangover Part 3, I want to just do a quick rundown of the last 2 previous Hangover movies. The first Hangover movie, while I don't completely agree to, everyone's claim that it's the best comedy ever made, or it's the best comedy in a very long time, I certainly did enjoy the movie. It was very entertaining. I laughed multiple times through the movie, and I still do watch it multiple times after, it has been out, for a while now. Now, one thing that I hated about the first Hangover movie I really, really liked, and then they made a sequel, The Hangover Part 2, which was downright just horrible in every single way possible. Now, I did find the movie entertaining. I did laugh in a couple scenes here and there, but it's just a giant carbon copy of the first movie, and that's really, it sucks, in my opinion. It was just a giant carbon copy of the first movie, in my opinion, and everyone seems to agree, and yet everyone is surprised. Whenever I talk about this movie, people are surprised that The Hangover 2 ended up being just the exact same movie as the first movie. Well, when you really only have a premise like The Hangover, you kind of have to expect the next movie to be exactly the same thing as the first movie, given the premise. I mean, it's a premise that is going to be repeated with a sequel. There was no story to tell after the first Hangover movie, so why make a sequel? Well, because the first one was successful, of course. Why else are sequels made? Because the first one was really, really good. So give the people, again, what they want to see. But this movie is just a giant copy, exact shot for shot the same movie as the first Hangover movie. But then again, given how, how many Hollywood remakes are coming out these days, and, those remakes are making minor, to extreme changes from the original source material, this could be, The Hangover 2 can be considered an actual a remake. I mean, again, given how many Hollywood sequels are changing up the original source material a little bit, this can be considered a sequel. It can be considered a remake instead of having, it's a remake of Hangover, but but instead of it being in Las Vegas, it's in Bangkok. I mean, again, given how many remakes these days are changing up stuff, it can be a remake. Why it came out 2 years after the first movie or the original movie is beyond me, but it can be considered a remake. That's just how, shot for shot, the exact same thing the movie is. I know people will argue that, well, the movie takes place in Bangkok, so it's a completely different movie. No, it's not. Movies change their locations all the time in sequels, so it doesn't matter. It's the exact same goddamn movie. What matters is the actual plot and the way that it, is in the way that it pans out. That's what matters, and it pans out exactly the same thing as the first movie, only with a minor difference. Like, oh hey, this person got kidnapped instead of this person, but instead of this person that kidnapped that person, it's this person that kidnapped that person. Instead of Doug that got lost, it's Stu's brother-in-law, Teddy. Instead of Chow that took him, it's Paul Giamatti's character, but it's not really Paul Giamatti's character, it's this and that. It's just, yet again, another big series of misunderstandings, and, oh, I thought it was this, but not really that, and, but I still found the movie to be entertaining. It's a movie that I walked out of saying, that was, pretty bad, but I was kind of entertained. Kind of like Batman Forever, where, yeah, it's bad, it's not really the best movie of all time, but it still is entertaining. Like, I can sit down and watch it whenever I'm bored and be very entertained after watching it. And again, I did laugh at multiple parts in the movie, but overall, it's exactly the same movie, so you might as well just watch the first movie, because it's the exact same thing as that movie, except the first movie is actually better, and a little bit more funnier, and a lot more clever. Now we move on to The Hangover Part 3, which right there is my main problem. Why the fuck is there a Hangover Part 3? It was bad enough we had a second one, let alone a third one. There was no story to tell after the first Hangover movie, and the second one proved that. Why the hell would you make a sequel then? Another sequel, a Part 3? And, you know, they consider, and something that really pissed me off about this movie that wasn't exactly in the movie, or something about the movie, was the marketing. The people who marketed this movie marketed it as, you know, the end, you know, the final chapter to the Hangover, you know, trilogy, the Hangover saga. It's not a trilogy, it's not a saga, because there is no story there is no main story that encompasses all three of these movies, other than they're the exact same movies as the last one. It doesn't count unless it has a main story arc, you know, following all three of the movies. It's not a trilogy, you know. And just because each and every single movie is just a rip off of the last one, again, doesn't count. It's just rip offs of the last movie. That was one thing that just irritated the shit out of me about this movie. Like, it's not a trilogy of films, it's an accidental franchise. You know, no way near is it a trilogy. When I think of great film trilogies, I think of the Back to the Future trilogy, the original Star Wars trilogy, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Dark Knight trilogy. Those are some great trilogies out there. This is not a trilogy of, just because there's 3 movies in a franchise doesn't by any means make it an actual trilogy. Unless it has a main story that accompanies all 3 of the movies, it's not a trilogy, at least in my opinion. The reason why I ended up hating this movie was because, you know, the movie was just downright boring and it just felt tiring. And you could just tell that the people making this movie and everyone associated with this movie were just bored as all hell and just tired of making these stupid Hangover movies. You know, and again, like I mentioned, while I hated The Hangover Part 2, and while I hated, you know, that it was just a giant carbon copy of the first movie, I still walked out of it entertained. I still walked out of it, you know, and I still laughed at some parts in the movie. With this movie, on the other hand, I walked out of it just bored, pissed off, tired, and just barely remembering the movie that I had actually just walked out of and I had just seen. That's not good, especially for a Hangover movie. And again, what just depresses the shit out of me about this movie, and just makes me so bored and tired that everyone associated with it just honestly does not look like they want to be there making this movie. One bit. They look bored as hell, they look tired, they look like they don't want to make another stupid Hangover movie. And that then transcends onto the audience, and you get the same attitude and mood as those people making the movie do. And when the people making the movie don't at all appreciate the movie that they're making, what makes you think that the audience themselves are going to appreciate the movie that they're watching? I didn't laugh once in the entire movie. And again, hated Hangover Part 2, still laughed in some of the scenes in that movie, and was still entertained. I didn't laugh, I didn't even chuckle, I didn't even crack a smile during this movie. I was just sitting there emotionless. I wasn't mad. Okay, I was kind of mad, but I wasn't laughing, I wasn't crying, I was literally just silent. Just pure silence with this face the entire hour and a half. With nothing, not a single crack, not a single smile, just nothing. There was not a joke in the movie that made me laugh in a Hangover movie. I may hate a Hangover movie, but I at least expect it to make me laugh. This movie could not pull that off at all. Not a single joke in the movie was funny, or even remotely even by the perimeter of funny. Not a single joke was at all funny. Not a single joke landed. It was just silence. Again, just pure and utter silence. No one around me was laughing. No one sitting next to me was laughing. I myself was not laughing. No, okay, well, you know what? There were some people that were laughing, but you know what jokes those people were laughing at? When the Alan character mispronounced a word. Oh, that's funny. He said something differently than how we say it. That's so funny. And he totally didn't do that in the first movie, and he totally didn't do that in the second movie. It's so funny. These are the jokes. These are the literal jokes in the movie. You know, Alan says something wrong. Oh, it's funny. Or, you know, he asks the Bradley Cooper character where he got his shirt like 5 times. Oh, that's funny, man. I wonder why I'm not laughing, because it's just so funny. These are the jokes. These are legitimate jokes. Okay, they're not legitimate jokes, but they're in the movie. These are jokes that are in the movie. This is what the writers think is funny. That's not funny. Again, it just shows you how tired, how they're just limping to the barn with this movie. Just how tired and bored. I just want to end this movie so that they don't have to come back and make another one. Just boring, it's tired, and it's just downright not funny. Boring is a special word of the day today, people, because this movie is just simply boring. And again, hated the second one. I was still entertained by it. I didn't walk out of that being bored. I walked out of it, saying it was just the exact same thing as the first movie, but it was just, it was still entertaining. This was just boring. And for a series of films called The Hangover, the last movie doesn't have, a hangover in it. It does in the after credits, but that's the after credits. That's like way after the movie is over. They have a big joke at the end of the movie, which is kind of ripping on the whole premise of these hangover movies. But that should have been the movie. The movie is called The Hangover. That should have been the movie. This movie is not The Hangover. It's literally just a giant, long, just completely irrelevant heist movie. That's the entire movie. Without a hangover in it, it's just a giant heist movie. Because that's the whole premise of the movie. They're trying to steal back gold to get back Doug. They even resort to having Doug being kidnapped in this movie. At least with the second movie, they kidnapped somebody else, or somebody else was lost. Here, it's literally just, let's go back to Doug from the first movie. So this is even more of a ripoff than the second movie. And I hate the second movie. And I told you how much that is a horrible ripoff of the first movie. This is even more of a ripoff, and yet it still doesn't have a hangover in it. It's both a ripoff and yet not a ripoff, and it's a paradox and a half, and it's just a bad movie, plain and simple. And again, this is just a side note, quick, just, I'm ranting enough about the movie, I might as well add this in there. Why the fuck was it rated R? Like, that's not a rhetorical question. Why the hell was this rated R? Nothing in this entire movie was raunchy, dirty, or disgusting enough to really warrant it an R rating. Again, it's kind of like when I was, thinking about Batman Forever, and you think to yourself, where in that entire movie does it say it needs to be a PG-13 movie? You look at the R rating in Hangover and you say to yourself, what in the movie says it needs to be an R rating? There wasn't any nudity, there wasn't any vulgarity, there wasn't anything raunchy enough to really merit it as an R rating. I know some people will argue that, well, they do say a lot of shits, fucks, and damn it's in the movie, but even some PG-13 movies can get away with saying, stuff like that. So you could have easily made this a PG-13 movie. And again, that just added to how boring this movie was. As much as I hate the second movie, again, it was extremely raunchy. It was extremely, vulgar and, disgusting at parts. But that's what kind of made it entertaining. This movie just had none of that, and it made it so less entertaining and just more boring. It was just a horrible, boring film. And to end this, Hangover saga, trilogy, total bullshit, it's not trilogy, to end this Hangover franchise, it's a franchise of movies, when there's multiple movies that don't have a single story running through each and every movie, that's what it's called, it's called a franchise. To end this Hangover franchise on this movie is really sad, but then again, that's kind of the point. This did not need to be a franchise. The fact that this is a franchise just ruins the first movie's credibility altogether. It just makes that movie look less good. This did not need to be a franchise of films. This should just ended up being one really good comedy, one really good movie, and that was it. But no, you don't end up, having it be that you just have to drag it out and just beat every single last drop of blood out of this movie. And I do not at all believe that this is going to be the last Hangover movie when Bradley Cooper, Ed Helms, and Zach Galifianakis don't have anything going on. They're going to be like, hey, Hangover 3 sounds pretty good right now, doesn't it? Hangover 4 sounds pretty good right now, doesn't it? Then again, they're doing pretty good right now, so, maybe they won't ever make a Hangover Part 4. Who knows? But I definitely doubt that this is not the next Hangover movie. There's going to be a next movie, I know it. And I'm not going to be there to see it because I fucking hate this movie. And just downright bad. Just a downright really, really just boring as all hell movie. Just do not watch it. Stick to the first movie. Hell, even stick to the second movie. I hate the second one. I just told you how much I hate the second one. And yet, I'm still saying to watch that over this one. That's really fucking sad, people. That is really fucking sad. But let's just forget about this movie. Let's move on to number 2, which is Grown Ups 2. Okay, I really don't mean to number the movies by the title, by numbers that are in the titles. It's just totally by accident, but yeah, Grown Ups 2. Are you guys really surprised that I put this on my list? On my worst of movies of 2013? Are you really surprised I put Grown Ups 2 on the list? You know, even if it's not number 1, are you still surprised that it's number 2 or any number on this list? You guys had to expect this. This is Grown Ups 2. The second that I heard Grown Ups 2 was coming out in 2013, I knew to myself, it's going to be on my number, it's going to be on my worst of movies of this year list, so, you know, yeah, I wasn't surprised at all this movie made my list. In fact, I was just going to put this movie on my list without seeing it. I was going to put it on my list regardless of me seeing it. That was it. I wasn't even going to see it. I was just going to put it on my list and say, you guys know why it's on my list, and skip over it. But I really did want to see it, not because I wanted to see a good movie, but because I really wanted to give you guys a fair review of a very, very bad movie. And that's what I'm going to do right now. The main problem with this movie, right out from the gate, Grown Ups 2. Grown Ups 2. The emphasis on 2. Dos. Grown Ups 2. Who the fuck asked for Grown Ups 2? Who was standing outside of Happy Madison Studios and saying, with their little picket signs, you know, we want Grown Ups 2, we want Grown Ups 2. Who asked for Grown Ups 2? And I'm totally not kidding here. Again, this is not a rhetorical question. I'm being dead serious right now. I really want to know. Who asked for Grown Ups 2? Who asked for Grown Ups 2? That's a legitimate question, and that's my main problem with this movie. There did not need to be a sequel to Grown Ups. To the movie Grown Ups from 2010. There did not need to be a sequel to that movie. And yet there was, and that's what we have here. Grown Ups 2. I guess maybe it was the same people that said, we want a Ferngully 2, or we want a Troll 2, or we want a Birdemic 2. I guess it was just all those same people that just want sequels to just shit movies. Shit movies. This movie actually was worse than the first Grown Ups. And the first Grown Ups movie I absolutely despise. I despise every movie by Happy Madison that is associated with Adam Sandler, or Kevin James, or David Spade, or Chris Rock. Hate them all. Hate them. Not funny. Hate every single Happy Madison movie to date. You know, maybe Happy Gilmore is an exception. Maybe even, you know, that's what everyone says whenever talking about these Happy Madison movies. Well, they're bad now, but Happy Gilmore was pretty good, and this was good. And really, when you look back at them, they're not that good. Okay, Happy Gilmore is not that good as everyone says it is. It's really, when you look at it, not that great. But compared to Adam Sandler's later movies, it's looking pretty damn good now, isn't it? That's my main problem with this movie, the fact that it exists. The fact that the movie exists is evidence enough as to why I hate the movie, and why it's even on my list. I can just say it right there. Grown Ups 2. Who asked for Grown Ups 2? And I can just move on. But I'm going to move on to what else is really bad about the movie. What else is just downright despicable about this movie. The movie is pointless. Shocking, I know. What I mean by that is the movie has no scenes that go anywhere. The movie is literally just a series of random scenes that go absolutely nowhere. And there's barely even a plot in the entire movie. The main plot is that Adam Sandler and, you know, his friends from the last movie, except for Rob Schneider. Yeah, Rob Schneider is not in this movie, and they never address at all why he's not in the movie. After a while you forget, but then you realize, oh shit, Rob Schneider isn't in the movie. Okay, this movie has some credit going for it, but, you know, that makes it even look worse. This movie, Grown Ups 2, was too good, no pun intended, but was too good for Rob Schneider. Rob Schneider was too good for Grown Ups 2. Really think about that for a second. You know what? Fuck the fact that this movie even exists as it being bad enough, as an explanation for why this movie is bad. That right there, that should show you how bad this movie is. Rob Schneider didn't even show up to do it. This is the guy that did The Animal, Deuce Bigalow, Male Gigolo, and every other fucking Adam Sandler, Happy Madison shitfest ever. And yet he said no to this. That should show you why I hate this movie. That should be enough evidence as to why this movie sucks. That should be a fact enough why this is on my list. Enough right there. But back to whatever I was talking about. The movie's plot, or lack thereof, is Adam Sandler and a couple of his friends from the last movie are trying to put together a party celebrating the 80s, and that's really about it. And that's the entire movie, just them getting ready for a party. Well, no, that would actually mean that they're actually prepping and getting stuff for the party and a bunch of other stuff here and there. They don't do that till maybe the last 30 minutes of the movie. The rest of it is literally all that you would expect from the Happy Madison, Adam Sandler movies. Someone falls in dog shit. Someone gets pissed on. Someone gets thrown up on. Someone falls down. Someone gets hit in the nuts. And again, that's one of the things that makes this movie absolutely fucking horrible. The bullshit, stupid, lowest common denominator, juvenile humor that only 7-year-old retarded kids will find funny. Or the rest of America, because they're the bastards that made this movie #1 at the box office the same weekend that Pacific Rim came out. I'm dead serious. This movie came out the exact same opening weekend as Pacific Rim, and Grown Ups 2 made the #1 box office. And Pacific Rim came in second place. The giant robot fighting giant monsters came in second place. But the giant piece of shit turd, Grown Ups 2, came in first place. Okay, we as humans, we as a society, should now wear that as a badge of shame. We made Grown Ups 2 #1 at the box office, but Pacific Rim was the one that came in second place. Grown Ups, Pacific Rim. Again, we need to wear that from now on as a badge of absolute utter shame and disappointment to any living beings in this universe, or any other universe out there for that matter. Goddamn, that is just totally fucked up and really, 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 really disappointing. Just fuck, that's sad. Again, the movie is just a giant, again, going back to the whole movie as a whole, it's just a giant random series of random scenes that go nowhere. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. No scene goes anywhere. And they only have that whole party at the end of the movie as, you know, a very broken, very cracked, very fragile framework as to why all of this stuff is happening. But there is no reason why this stuff is happening. You have one scene where David Spade gets stuck in a tire rolling down a hill and then is stopped by Shaquille O'Neal. Yeah, in his first film since Kazam or Steel. Again, you really wondering why this movie's bad? It goes nowhere, has absolutely no point in the movie, and then they have that the stupid schmaltzy, you know, family lesson bullshit at the end of it, and you also have a subplot with Adam Sandler overcoming one of his, you know, school time bullies, and you got Taylor Lautner thrown into the fucking mix. The sad part about that is he's the most entertaining thing about the movie. Totally not kidding. That is sad when you have people who have proven that they can be funny, like Adam Sandler, Chris Rock, Kevin James. These are guys that have proven before they can be funny, are the least funniest thing in the movie that has Taylor Lautner in it. And Taylor Lautner actually ends up being funny in the movie. Are you still wondering why this movie is bad? Because if you are, you're the target demographic for the movie. Congratulations, you suck. Taylor Lautner is the funniest thing in your movie compared to Adam Sandler, Kevin James, Chris Rock. Guys who have proven that they can be funny, that they have been, you know, guys who have proven they can be funny. They have been funny before. But Taylor Lautner is the funniest thing in your movie with all those guys in it. Just go, this movie sucks. Plain and fucking simple. Just sucks. Okay? Just don't watch it. And, you know, the first movie, Like I mentioned, this movie is actually worse than the first Grown Ups. Hate the first Grown Ups. Don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I fucking hate the first Grown Ups movie. But that one actually did have a plot, and the characters actually had a reason to do what they're doing. You know, they were going to the campgrounds, and they were going to where they grew up because their kids are growing up on technology and not really growing up knowing what is really good. So they take them to the campgrounds and where they grew up. That's that plot. That's what they're doing. That's a whole bonding movie and whatever. Here, just a bunch of random scenes thrown together for nothing with a very thin plot of they're gonna throw a big party at the end of it. You know what? No, that's not the plot of the movie. You want to know what the plot of the movie is? You want to know what the real driving force of this movie is? Adam Sandler needed a car payment, and that's why he made Grown Ups 2, because he needed to pay a payment on his car. That's why Grown Ups 2 was made, okay? Not because they wanted to tell a good story, but because Adam Sandler needed a couple bucks his way. That's it. That's the entire movie right there. That's the reason why it's made. That's the plot of the movie. That's the financing of pretty much all these Happy Madison bullshit movies to begin with. That's the creative process with these movies. I'm done. I'm done talking about this movie. Just don't fucking see it. It's Grown Ups fucking 2. That should be explanation enough as to why this movie does not work. And while the first movie had a lot of scenes that did not go anywhere either, that's all this movie was. It's literally not a movie that makes me angry. I know I seem very angry right now, but it's not a movie that makes me angry. It's just a movie that makes me just forget I saw this movie. Which isn't a bad thing, mind you, because really, I want to forget about this movie as much as I possibly can. But, it just is a movie you walk out of just barely remembering anything that goes on because there was nothing that was going on that was relevant to the actual plot. It was just a bunch of random scenes of random bullshit happening. That's it. That's the entire movie. So that's all I have to say about Grown Ups 2. And now we move on to the number one spot. The creme de la creme. The cash crop of crap. This is my number one worst movie. Number one worst film of 2013. And I mentioned this before. This is now the worst movie I have ever seen, period. Not only the worst movie I've seen this year, the worst movie I've just seen, hands down. So the number one worst movie of this year is, and say it with me now, everyone, Movie 43. Yes, Movie 43. What can I say about this movie? What can I say about this movie? I can say that it was, I'm speechless. I really am speechless. Jack and Jill was originally the worst movie I've ever seen in my entire life. That was originally it. That was number one. So the fact that this movie is worse than that is a sentiment. It's a sentiment, really. You know the Marvel movies that, the Marvel movies where they have the little Marvel logo on it? This should be that, because this is a Marvel. This is literally an achievement of filmmaking, not an achievement of, gratitude, not an achievement that should be celebrated, but a pure achievement of how bad you can possibly make a single solitary film. That's Movie 43, right there. This movie is, I'm literally having a hard time thinking about it. The movie is just downright fucking horrible. When I talk about the Happy Madison movies and the fact that they are just nothing but a collection of the most lowest common denominator, juvenile fart and shit jokes, that's all this movie is. That is all that this movie is. Just the collection of fart and poop and piss and shit and sex and racist jokes thrown together that will only entertain the 12-year-old prepubescent morons that find that shit funny. I find that shit funny. That's all that this movie is. And, I've seen movies before that have been nothing but that. You've seen me review movies that have been nothing but that. But what makes this, especially bad, and what makes this the worst movie I've ever seen in my entire life, is that when Adam Sandler is doing, those same lowest common denominator, dumb, sexual innuendo, bullshit, shitty jokes, you can understand that because he doesn't know how to make a fucking movie. Okay? That's that. He does not know how to make a fucking movie. You can understand why the jokes suffer in those movies, because he does not know how to make a proper film, a good movie, or at least doesn't know how to anymore. This movie had no excuse. This movie had no reason being this completely uninspired and downright horrendous. You had pretty much 50% of the actors that make up Hollywood in this movie. That's the baffling thing about this movie. That's the marvel right there. That's the absolute wonder about this movie. How the fuck they got all of these big named A-list, really big in the news right now actors in this movie. Like, if you name any given, big Hollywood actor or actress right now, odds are they're in this movie. I really find it difficult to see who is not in this movie, rather than who is in this movie. Big named actors from, Richard Gere, Hugh Jackman, Emma Stone, Halle Berry, Elizabeth Banks, Josh Duhamel, just so many big actors everyone knows are in this movie. That's the biggest question right there. How the fuck did they get in this movie? Why are they in this movie? I really refuse to believe they agreed to be in this movie. I really refuse to agree that Hugh Jackman, Halle Berry, Emma Stone, Chloe Grace Moretz, actors with a lot of respect, who have made a lot of good movies, who have won many awards, and who have pretty much proven they are great actors, approved to doing this. I personally believe, and this is probably the truth, I personally believe they were fucking blackmailed. I'm dead serious. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm not trying to make a joke. This is literally me right here, Colin. This is literally me really, really, really sincerely giving my thoughts of how the actors were put in this movie. I believed somebody dug up some really fucking nasty shit, or some really fucking scandalous shit with these actors, and said, you motherfuckers don't be in my fucking movie. I'm putting this shit on the internet right now. That's creative. That's how these actors were put in this movie. Because we've seen these people. We've seen these people do good movies. We've seen them do great movies. They've made some bad movies before, but they've done great, great, great movies. And you can kind of understand why they were, why they were in some of those other bad movies that, some of those other said bad movies I just mentioned. They are smarter. They are so much goddamn smarter than this. I personally believe they were blackmailed. I personally believe they were not in agreement to doing this movie. They were told to do this movie or fucking else. If they were under a death threat, if they were under, again, if someone dug up some nasty shit, that makes sense. I do not believe a single goddamn bit these sons of bitches agreed to this movie. They did not agree to this movie. They were either threatened with their life, they were either blackmailed, they either owed something to a friend, but even then, I told that friend to go fuck himself. They thought I was going to be in this piece of shit. There was no way possible any of these actors agreed to be in the movie. Unless the new definition of agreed is, I was under blackmail. That's it. That's the only way I can understand these people were in this movie. And then we have what really makes me sad about this movie. What really sets it apart from all the other bullshit comedies with these really juvenile, offensive, disgusting jokes that are just there for shock value and aren't really funny. What sets us apart from all those other movies is that this has people working. This has people who have proven they can be funny, that they can be funny, who have proven that they can be funny, who have proven before that they can be funny. These are people who know what they're doing, people who have been in great movies, people who have been in amazing movies. This movie has those people working on them. Peter Farrelly, the Farrelly brothers, directed this movie. Elizabeth Banks directed some of the skits in this movie. Again, there was a lot of big named A-list actors in this movie, and it ends up being this unfunny and this bad. That's what sets it apart from everything else. And the Bring It All Home, what makes this movie sad is that you have all of these great, funny, comedic actors, comedic and serious, dramatic actors in this movie. They cannot make a good comedy. What makes it sad, they cannot make a comedy. But there are people on YouTube, on the internet, with nobodies, with a shoestring budget and one camera, who can make me piss myself with laughter, who can make me laugh my ass off, laugh to the point where I cry. I know friends, I know people who can make me laugh, who can make me so much appreciate comedy so much more. And yet these sons of bitches, these people who are paid to do this, these people whose jobs are to make me laugh, or to make people laugh, they cannot pull that off. But somebody off the internet with, again, one camera and a shoestring budget can do that. That is, in my opinion, the death of comedy. That right there is the death of comedy. When Hollywood cannot make me laugh. People who are paid to make me laugh cannot pull that off. But nobody can do that. That is, my opinion, the death of comedy right there. Right there. It's death of comedy. And that's what sets this movie apart from every single other bad movie, bad comedy with juvenile humor and juvenile jokes and sex and just whatever. This movie, where you have so many great actors and so many great people working on it, it turns out this bad. And yet people on a shoestring budget cannot possibly, it can make me laugh. But people who have proven before that they can be funny, who are paid, whose jobs are to make, to be funny, cannot pull that off at all. These are people that know what funny is. These are people that know what, humor and comedy is. And yet they make this, and they agree to be in this movie. And I heard for so long, this movie was supposed to be made like 10 years ago, 10 years before it came out. The movie was being tossed around. Richard Gere tried getting out of being in this movie. He tried not to be in this movie. That skit with him in the movie is filmed at his house, dude. That's just how much he was just not. He said he was going to be in the movie, but they're going to do what he's going to do. Because that's just how much he did not want to be in this movie. This is the dude that said, I'm going to shove a gerbil up my ass. This is the dude that thought shoving gerbils up his ass was a smarter idea than this movie. I think I'd rather do that than watch this piece of shit. Who wouldn't? I know I say a lot of the time, whenever I'm reviewing a really bad movie, this was really hard to sit through. This was agonizing to sit through. When I say it in other reviews, I mean it as a joke. Here, this was literally just painful to sit through. This movie was like, what, an hour and a half? Felt like 5 hours. It was agonizing. It was painful to sit through. There's just such a cheap, incredibly cheap and just shitty production quality to this entire movie. And that is especially noticeable when we get to the whole Batman skit. This movie, I'm not even gonna give any credit for having Batman in it, because it's just that bad. It has Batman in it, and I can't even give it some credit. Then that you know that means it's a bad movie. Okay, you know that means it's a bad movie. When the costumes, like, they couldn't even run down to Party City and get the really shitty looking Batman and Robin costume with the plushy, squishy pecs in them. They couldn't even do that. They literally just got a mask and put like a fucking little sharp, pointy piece of the paper on it, and it looks so shitty and cheap. They couldn't get a couple $15 fucking costumes from Party City, but they went with this shit. It literally, I have made better costumes of those characters in my life. I have made better costumes than this movie gives out in this entire movie, than in that scene. And I know the movie has no credit at all, so making fun and poking at something like that is entirely pointless. But the movie's so bad, I don't give a shit anymore. I'm just gonna make fun of everything in the movie. It's that bad. It's literally that fucking bad. The humor, the jokes suck. And, you know, some people say that, you know, the last skit at the end of it with Terrence Howard is the only funny thing in the whole movie. No, it's not. The punchline of the entire skit is, you're black, you're going to be fine. That's the entire skit. Having that go on for 5 minutes is not even funny for maybe 10 seconds. Like, maybe 1, maybe 2 seconds, I don't know. But 5 minutes is not funny. With the punchline is just, you're black, you're going to be fine. I'm not just saying that because I'm a full fucking white kid or anything. Not at all. That's not the problem at all. It's just that's not funny. It can be funny if it was done right, but here it wasn't done right. It was fucking stupid. So, that's movie 43. It's now the worst movie I've ever seen in my entire life. It's baffling how you can have so many great people working on it and it ends up being this bad. And yet, I can find people on YouTube that are so much more funnier than this. In fact, go watch, you want to see funny sketch comedy, go watch some fucking Monty Python, Whitest Kids You Know, go watch those sons of bitches. They are funny. They know how to do sketch comedy. These morons, fuck them. This is just downright horrendous. But then again, what did you expect from a movie that was made in 2010, then held back 3 years and released in February? January and February is just a toxic waste dumping ground of horrible fucking movies. So if anyone was expecting this movie to be good, you're a dumbass, and you should be lobotomized, or fucking killed, for that matter. So that's all I have to say about all of these worst movies of 2013. This video is very long, but that's what you get when I'm talking about really shitty movies. So, sorry about the length of my videos recently. But yeah. That's about that, and if this video is released very late, then I apologize, but I'll have another video up this weekend, so I'll see you guys then. I'm sorry the video's long, so I'll just end it right here. See ya.